Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Kent Hovengroiper podcast. Today we have a topic that's near and dear to my heart, eschatology. That is the study of the end times. And the reason why it's near and dear to my heart is I actually say that one of the reasons why I'm a more devout Christian today is because of, the reason why I got into Seventh-day Adventism was for the eschatology. But I would say, a lot of my worldview is informed by eschatology. And I think it's something that's a real gift from God, that He's given us this preview of things to come. And so it pains me that most understandings of eschatology are kind of retarded, honestly, like stone cold retarded. And so I have I want to discuss some of the more popular views of eschatology. So let us begin with the first and most popular view, which is either unintentional or intentional apathy and ignorance. So, I discovered quickly after I got red-pilled, I guess you could say, on the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, among others. I wanted to talk about it with other people. And I found out that most people kind of like put their hands over their ears and go, la 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 la, I can't hear you, la la la. That's kind of their that's their view. Either they don't know, they don't care, they don't want to know, they don't want to care. It's really weird to me that, like, I'm a Christian, I believe in the Bible. Just that book at the end, nobody can understand that. That's just there for no reason at all whatsoever. Don't try understanding it, bro. You're gonna make a lot of people have tried to understand it, and they were all wrong, which means that nobody should ever try to understand it ever. This to me is really stupid, I think, because one, what is that saying about God? Okay, so God, in His wisdom, has given us prophets who have revealed to us things to come, both past, present, and future. And when we see a piece of prophecy that we don't understand, I'm not going to say we. When you, talking to the intentionally ignorant person here, when you see a piece of prophecy that you don't understand, why is your first assumption to say, well, can't understand it, we don't know, it doesn't matter? So God just gave it to us for absolutely no reason, because that's all God likes to do, right? God's up in heaven thinking, let me give those people down there, I'm just going to give them a book that they can't understand to make their heads hurt. I mean, you know how stupid that sounds? So I have no idea why people would say stuff like that. But all right, let's go to like the trick, the related claim, which is, well, it can't be understood, or when it happens, it'll make sense. Well, again, like, still, what was the point of giving it to us? The thing with let's look at the prophecies of the old, like the messianic prophecies, for example. Now, these, maybe some of them were a little tricky to understand, but if you faithfully studied them, and if you had the wisdom to understand them, then the Jews should have known that Jesus came when He did. I think, I've just discussed this, I've posted about this, how Daniel 9, I believe, clearly teaches the year that Messiah will begin His work. That's why Jesus announced in Mark 1:15, right after Jesus was baptized and tempted in the wilderness, He announced, the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand. Now, the time being referred to here is the prophetic period of time. So, like, literally, you could, as I've pointed out, you can use Daniel 9 to predict exactly when Jesus comes. And the Jews know this. That's why they moved the book of Daniel to they still consider it to be canonical, but they don't list them with the prophets. And I'm pretty sure in their Talmudic commentary on the text, they say, by the way, if anybody tries to calculate the time Messiah is coming from this, they're cursed. They're going to hell. Just trust us, bro. You can't look into it. So Yeah. So the idea that like prophecy is just like kind of pointless and it's just supposed to be scary, I feel like that's a very childish, not even childish actually. Children have curiosity. When a child reads it, he wants to know what it's about, what it means. This to me is like a jaded, hard-hearted, willful ignorance of the subject. So the other thing people say is, well, Jesus says nobody knows when he's coming back. So that just means, I guess, according to them, that just means that we should never attempt to study any eschatological passage ever. Like they'll say, Jesus says he's coming like a thief in the night. Okay, well, here's the thing. Paul explains this analogy for us. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. What Paul says is, but of the times and seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Now this is where people stop reading and say, well, nobody knows. Don't bother. Don't figure it out. Nobody knows. It doesn't matter. Okay, that's where people stop. But Paul continues. He says, but ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. You are all the children of light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for an helmet, the hope of salvation. Okay, so that to me doesn't actually sound like, don't bother, we don't know, nothing's gonna happen, blah, 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 I can't hear you. That to me sounds like, yes, okay, it's true. Nobody, when Jesus comes as a thief in the night, it's because the world does not know he's coming. And I have a reason for this, which I'll explain later when I talk about my own view. But the world will be unaware. But because we're Christians, because we know he's coming back, to go back to the analogy, if we knew that our house was being broken into, so to speak, then we would stay up all night and wait because we know he's coming. And that's the point Paul is making, that we're not going to sleep and be ignorant of what's going on outside the house as others do, but instead we're going to be vigilant and sober. So I don't know, this whole idea that this one's kind of funny because I remember when back when I used to do more interdenominational discourse, I would talk to Eastern Orthodox catechumens or Catholics or whatever, and I would ask them something about Revelation, and they would say, my priest said I'm not allowed to read Revelation yet, and I would have a Pepe chuckle at that one. That priest says, no, you can't read that you can't read that book. You're retarded, you're not going to understand it. You're forbidden from reading the Bible. Yeah, I mean, I could do a whole nother episode on how I hate the way that Rome and the East, I hate their attitude about the Bible. But anyway, moving on. So most people are just apathetic. They don't care. They don't want to know. Whatever. Okay, look, people are, sadly, even Christians, people in general are kind of just like cattle. And they don't have any desire to know anything deeper than Netflix TV shows or whatever. Okay, moving on. So most people who actually know something about eschatology, who are beyond the we can't know anything and we can't figure it out and it doesn't matter and blah blah, I can't hear you. Okay, so people who are beyond that, and in America this is, and you know what, I'll bet in the majority of the world, like 99% Protestants, to this day I feel like I never hear, I I don't even actually know what the official like Catholic or anything, or like even popular Catholic views on the end times are, because I just never hear any of their pundits talk about it. But I think they condemn premillennialism, but I don't know about that, honestly. Okay, so Protestants who actually think that eschatology might matter, they tend to be what are called dispensational premillennialists, or it might be the other way around. It might be premillennial dispensationalists, whatever. Yeah, I think it's that. So dispensationalists, or dispies, they have they're I'm just going to talk about their eschatology, but they have like I think the way dispensationalism works is that throughout the different periods in history, God has like operated by different rules, and so that doesn't sit well with everyone. I would say I don't really lean towards that. I lean more towards what they call covenant theology. But yeah, so dispensationalists, what they believe about the end times, and this is very popular, and it's I would say it's probably the default view, is, well, basically how it works is at some point in the future, according to many of them think soon. Well, a lot of people think that the end times are coming soon. It's kind of like an ecumenical opinion among low church Protestants, but they have like they do have some different ideas on how it's going to turn out. But a lot of them basically they say this. So first of all, they think there's all the prophecies in the Bible that refer to Israel, they think are still referring to the modern day nation of Israel. Now this to me is a little mind-boggling. I don't know why. Like, look, you like talk to some of these people, and it's insane. It's like talking to like a robot or like an NPC, and they're like, well, yeah, I think Israel is still blessed by God. And I'm like, okay, why? Why would they be blessed by God, considering that, first of all, it's not even like, it's barely even the same people. I subscribe to the Quasar replacement hypothesis, so based. But no, all that aside, right? I think the condition for being in a covenant to God is obedience. Okay, like God doesn't work like, oh, well, these Jews, I promised all these things to Abraham, and now I'm gonna give it all to the Jews in Israel. Well, I don't think. Okay, that's like kind of one thing in the Gospel of John that Jesus says is, he says to the Pharisees that they are actually not the sons of Abraham. They're not the sons of God. They are the sons of the devil. So now Jesus said that about the Pharisee. Now, and the average Pharisee back then was more moral, for sure, definitely more obedient. And they weren't, for the record, they weren't obedient to the law, but they were more obedient to the law than the modern day Jew. I mean, look, Israel's kind of a disgusting place. I think like, what do they call Tel Aviv? The gay Mecca, where 1/3 of adults are homosexuals. I mean, was Sodom and Gomorrah even that bad? I don't know. So, yeah, it's Israel today is not like, I feel like this is like something incredibly obvious, but like when you try to talk about this with people, it's like you're speaking Swahili. They just don't get it when you say, well, look, I think Israel, among other things. Oh, no. Okay, what did Israel do? Okay, Israel, it does not keep any of the covenant requirements. They do not have even a sanctuary. Forget a temple. They don't even have a sanctuary. They don't have a priesthood system. They don't have any of that. They have none of the markings of Israel. It's just a bunch of racially ambiguous Semites in what was once called the Holy Land thousands of years ago. Well, I suppose it's always been considered the Holy Land, but I don't think it was really, I think when the temple, no, not even then, when the veil was torn, when Christ died on the cross, I think it's pretty clear that Israel, in a sense, it lost its status as the nation. And even if you don't think it was then, I think the destruction of Jerusalem kind of confirms that, God had enough with Israel, and now he's going to find the faithful Gentiles. Now, if any Jew wants to be converted and be saved, well, yeah, that's up to them. But I don't know, this whole idea that like, oh, well, they're like God's people over there and we support it. It's just this like bizarre sort of Zionism. I don't know. I don't know where people get it from. And it's funny. I remember when I was in Latin America on missions, it was so funny just like seeing these Hispanics, these Indians really like with like stars of David on them. And I remember like once I passed by, or I was way out in the sticks, like literally middle of nowhere, and we passed by this store called Miscellanea Israel, like I guess just anything related to Israel for sale. Yeah, it's weird. It's like Israel's like a good luck charm for them. But okay, so now the issue with this is that this bleeds into their end times thinking, and they think that, well, what's going to happen in the end times is that they're going to rebuild the third temple in Jerusalem, and then the Antichrist is going to go into that third temple and declare that he's God. Somebody's going to shoot him in the head, but he's going to recover miraculously, and the world will worship him. And yeah, I think. Oh, also, sorry, excuse me. This is during the tribulation. We have to talk about the most egregious part, which is at the beginning of the tribulation, or right before it begins. You have the rapture. Okay, so the rapture is, simply put, it's insane that this is like dogma for many people, like the rapture. And what I mean by that, hold on, let me clarify what I'm saying. So the rapture, specifically the way they believe it, is that one day it's going to be like Left Behind. You're gonna be walking down the street, and you're a filthy, no good sinner who's on day 2 of NoFap, and you're gonna be with your buddy. You're walking with your buddy. Now your buddy is a good, pious man. He's on day 8 of NoFap, and he's gonna get raptured. And you're just going to look, he's not there anymore. I don't know if he leaves his clothes behind or something or whatever, but like he just disappears. Okay, there's a massive invisible vacuum cleaner in the sky, and God just sucked up all the Christians and left those filthy sinners on day 2 of NoFap behind. And then, okay, once that happens, then you have 7 years exactly until Jesus comes back. Okay, now during those 7 years, yeah, you have the third temple rebuilt in Israel, and somebody says that they're God in there, and the world worships them, and then you have the mark of the beast, and then Jesus comes back and destroys it. Okay, all right, sounds nice, sounds like a fun little theory, but the issue is none of this really is biblical. It's like Bible themed, but it's not. Okay, so where do they get okay, when I talk about Daniel 9. Okay, they agree with me on Daniel 9 mostly, except for the very last part where it discusses the last week. Now here's the thing, they like screw up the prophecy, and actually this was like probably the first time I was taught on prophecy. It was my evangelical youth pastor. I love this guy, by the way, he's great. But I remember he was teaching on Daniel 9. Okay, he went through the whole prophecy. I'm like, wow, this is so cool how like the days signify years and how it like matches up. And then now let me go to Daniel 9 again real quick. Hold on, let me find out my Bible. So Daniel 9 at the end. So Daniel 9 discusses these 70 weeks, and basically it takes 7 weeks to rebuild Jerusalem, or 49 years, because we know that a day in prophecy signifies a year. And so we have 49 years, and that is indeed how long it took to rebuild Jerusalem. And then, but 69 weeks in total before the 70th week. Now, during the 70th week, it says Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. And he shall now, I believe this is referring to Jesus, but people think this is referring to the Antichrist. But it says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Okay, so now look, when I read this, I think it's kind of like verse 27. That's the tricky part. No, I don't think it's tricky, but this is where people go wrong. So when it says he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. So they're saying, the Antichrist is in the temple, and he's telling them to stop the sacrifices and to worship him instead. No, what this is referring to. So, okay, this is how cool God's prophecy is. So 3.5 years into Jesus' ministry, or in the middle of the week, in the midst of the week, if you will, he caused the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Again, that veil was torn when Jesus died on the cross. And so, since then, because Christ was the ultimate sacrifice, not a single animal that the Jews have slaughtered has ever meant anything in God's eyes. Okay, it's over. It's finished. So that's what this is referring to. And then the other thing is, they think, the Antichrist is going to destroy Jerusalem or whatever. I'm not entirely sure the specifics of how they interpret that. Well, look, Jesus promised that he would indeed destroy Jerusalem, and he did. That's what happened in 70 AD. Okay. So what they do is they take that last week and they say, well, that's the future. That's a 7-year tribulation. So you have this whole prophecy that's working great and totally normal in my view. And for whatever reason, they just boost the last week, way into an unspecified part in the future. They say, well, there's a church age in between the 69th week and the 70th week. And I'm like, well, says who? Says who? You can't just claim that. You don't get to just make that up, that there's a church age because no, that's absurd, especially because the prophecy works as is. You don't need to make things up to make it work. In fact, when you make things up to make it work, you're actually not making it work. It's a disaster. Why are you doing this? And so, that was my first exposure to eschatology. I'm like, wait a second, where does he get this church age from? And so now, if we think about the idea of the rapture, which is that, again, all the Christians will just kind of vanish at the beginning of this tribulation. Well, okay, so the actual rapture verse passage is, again, back in 1 Thessalonians. Let me find it. Okay. 1 Thessalonians, where is it? Yeah, 1 Thessalonians 4. Okay, and it says, verses 16 through 18, for the Lord himself, actually, hold on, let me go back to verse 14. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words. Okay. This is nice, but to me, this doesn't really sound like the vacuum that's sucking up all the Christians into heaven and nobody sees it. This sounds like Christ returning and his visible return. Jesus doesn't come like in secret. They refer to it as the secret rapture, I believe I've heard it called. But that doesn't seem to line up. What this seems to me is that Christians who are on earth at Jesus' coming actually go to meet him in the sky, and the dead rise. I believe this is referring to the first resurrection of the dead, which we'll talk about in a bit. The resurrections of the dead, because a belief system I want to discuss next, I believe, errs in those regards. But I don't think there's nowhere in the Bible that says you have the rapture before the 7-year tribulation. And the thing with the rapture is it's kind of you have Left Behind, which is it's really funny that the guy who makes The Chosen, his dad did Left Behind. It's what is it, how many generations of subversive, disgusting Christian media do we have in this Jenkins family? But so Left Behind, it's I think if all the Christians kind of got vacuumed into the sky, I feel like that would be I feel like that poses a lot of interesting questions that are never addressed in the Bible, even though I would expect some, for example, wouldn't everybody then realize I don't know. It's just really strange. It's just not. It's frankly just not in the Bible. It frustrates me to no end. And it's funny when you meet like a evangelical type of guy. And actually, I did meet one. I met a couple, but you meet one and they're like, people are like, oh, this like actually so this happened. So I was in Guatemala. There's this. They're I think half American. They might have been 100% American actually, but there was this girl who I worked with, and she had a brother. She's like, my brother's really into eschatology. Maybe you should talk to him. I'm like, oh yeah. She's like, yeah. He's edgy. He doesn't believe in the rapture. And I like a hearty chuckle to myself. It was really funny. But yeah, I feel like as soon as you investigate this, it just crumbles. Like why do we need to believe this? And okay, so how the story goes is that some girl had a vision in the early 1900s. And for some reason, they put the vision in the Schofield Study Bible. Then everybody bought the Schofield Study Bible and just took it for granted. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how true that is or how influential it really was. But yeah, no, there's no reason to believe this stuff. It's not in the Bible. Okay, so moving on from dispensational or premillennial dispensationalism, which I actually agree with the premillennial aspect, and we'll discuss what that means in a second, because I want to talk about postmillennialism and amillennialism now. And those are so I feel like as you go in reformed circles, postmillennialism is very popular. I would say it's probably the eschatology of reformed thinkers for the most part. Everyone I know is a postmillennialist. And so basically, now postmillennialism is not something I'm as intimately familiar with. So I'm going to try not to make any mistakes or misrepresent it. That said, I feel like it's really strange. So how postmillennialism works is that I believe they think we're in the millennium currently. No, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure whether we're in the millennium current. No, that's amillennialism. Excuse me. I believe in postmillennialism, and please send me an angry message or comment if this is wrong. But I believe how it works is at some point we're gonna actually, I feel like they might differ on this, but I think they believe that Jesus is going to come at the end of the millennium. Now, the millennium, for reference, let us go to Revelation 20. So, one second. Revelation, was it 20? Yeah, Revelation 20 talks about the devil being bound for 1,000 years, and basically this reign of Christ in that 1,000 years. Well, I guess, and so basically, well, okay, let me read the passage, okay, so we know what we're talking about. This is Revelation 20, 1 through 6. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Okay? So the difference between post, pre, and millennialism is when does Christ come in the millennium? Now, I believe he comes at the beginning of the millennium. I think, especially considering that verse or that passage in Thessalonians we just read, where it discussed how when Jesus comes back, the dead rise. Now here, again, we see the dead rising and reigning with Christ. To me, that very strongly implies that Jesus comes, the dead are raised, and then the reign begins. Okay, I think that's kind of clear, but I guess it's up for debate, because people think, well, what if actually Jesus comes at the end of the millennium? I'm like, what? But apparently, that's like the big. And then there's amillennialism, which is, well, Jesus, we're in the millennium right now. Millennium could be an indefinite amount of time. Jesus could come at any time. And that's like the Lutheran thing. Now, my big gripe with like Lutheran theology is I feel like it's always wishy-washy like this. Like, for example, with real presence. They're like, oh, Jesus is present in the Eucharist. We don't know how. We can't tell you how. It's a mystery. But if you don't believe it, you're eating and drinking damnation unto yourself. Okay. All right. So you have to believe this. We can't tell you anything about it. You just have to believe it because you do. Okay. I don't know. That's just, I feel like that's how all Lutheran theology is. And, they're like doctrine of election is, it's like Calvinism, but they're trying to pretend it's not Calvinism. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. What was I saying? Yeah. So I think, I personally, I think it's clear that Jesus comes at the beginning of the millennium. But basically what they say is that, we need to build the kingdom of God on earth, or something like that. That we need to, that right now Satan is currently bound, and we have authority as kings and priests, and we need to like rule the world, and then Jesus will come back. And that's like kind of that's actually popular in Pentecostal spheres too. I think it's called Dominionism, Seven Mountain Mandate. I don't know. Like all those people are, they're only doing stuff in Latin America, basically. But yeah, they think like, Christians need to like rule the world and then Jesus will come back. I don't know. I feel like that's just not what was taught by the Bible. And actually, back to like the Calvinists, like the Reformed thinkers, that's where you get like a lot of like the Reconstructionist thought, and even theonomy is basically operating based off of postmillennialism. And basically my main objection with theonomy is that, well, I don't think postmillennialism is true. I don't think there's a mandate to build this perfect kingdom of God on earth. I don't think it's possible. And honestly, frankly, the people of the earth do not deserve it. So, but anyway, moving on. Yeah, so that's I don't know. I just feel like, okay, well, we consider the millennium. It says the resurrection starts at the beginning of the millennium. So if we're in the millennium right now, when were the righteous raised to life? And they say, well, it's symbolic. It's referring to their how they became believers. But that doesn't make sense because people are becoming believers all the time. I don't know. It just feels like a weird way to read the text. And then at what point in Revelation, if that's referring to if that resurrection of the believers there is referring to regeneration, well, Revelation. And in the timeline laid out in Revelation, you don't really see the resurrection of believers elsewhere. So when is there a literal bodily resurrection? Because I believe that is sort of dogma. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't feel like a natural way to read it. And now, like I said, I don't know as much about it, so I can't give more detailed objections, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And especially considering, that Babylon... Okay, yeah, so let me talk about what I believe. Okay, so those are like the other main popular views. Maybe there are other views. I can't really think of them. We didn't really talk about like the difference between preterism and... Which I think I had a tweet the other day. It was, what was it, Boniface Option, talking about preterism, and the thread it really annoyed me because it was so wrong about everything. He didn't respond, coward. But okay. So what do I believe? Okay, well, let me just start in Revelation and just actually, no, we'll start in Daniel. Okay, we'll start in Daniel because Revelation is very much based off of Daniel. And if you don't understand Daniel, I don't think you should bother with Revelation. So I'm just going to go chapter by chapter and give a broad overview of what I believe. So now the story of Daniel, of course, is that he was a Jewish exile in the courts of Babylon, and him and his friends were, I guess, kind of adopted by the king to work for him. They were supposed to be wise men. So basically, the first prophecy in Daniel is in Daniel 2, and it's the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And this prophecy is kind of portrayed in different ways throughout Daniel. But basically, you have this massive image, this massive statue, and the head is made of gold. The breasts and the arms were of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. And then, well, I'll just read it from here. Daniel 2:34, thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So, in world history, okay, we had the Babylon, this is, in the Bronze Age, we have the kingdom of Babylon, which was great and mighty, but over the years it became degenerate and weak, and so was taken over by the Medo-Persian Empire, or the, how's it pronounced? Achaemenid Empire, I believe. And after them, the Greek Empire conquered Persia, and then we have Rome. Now this is where interpretation starts to differ, but then we have Rome, which conquered Greece, of course, and then Rome was divided into the nations of Europe, and those persist to this day. Now, what is the significance of this? Well, okay, if we go to Daniel, if we skip all the way ahead to Daniel chapter 7, because this is where really the more prophetical bulk is contained. We have this vision of four beasts, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can go check the Bible yourself if you don't believe my summary, and I would encourage you to do so. But essentially, Daniel has this dream of four beasts, and the first is a lion. It has eagle's wings. The wings are plucked. And the next beast is a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. The third is a leopard with 4 wings of a fowl on its back, and the leopard has 4 heads. And finally, a beast that isn't compared to any animal, but it's dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, had great iron teeth, devoured and brake in pieces, and it stamped the residue with the feet of it. It was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, so we have these 4 beasts. Now, briefly, so the first one, it signifies Babylon. This is pretty obvious, because first of all, the animal it describes is like the national animal of the kingdom of Babylon, at least as far as archaeology tells us. Like, they have statues of these things everywhere. And it was a good symbol for Babylon because of its ferocity, the speed that it conquered. And then towards, again, the end of towards its decline, it became, well, it even says that a man's heart was given to it as opposed to a lion's heart. And its wings were plucked. It became weak and effeminate. And then that's why it was conquered by the second beast, the bear. Now, it even notes that the bear was raised up on one side, or like leaning on one side. And this is interesting because the Medo-Persian Empire, again, it was an alliance of the Medes and the Persians. And, well, at first, the Medes were the stronger side, but eventually they kind of faded into the background, and it was the Persian Empire. And chapter 8 of Daniel actually refers to this explicitly. But, okay, so when we have the Persian Empire... Now, here's the thing. This is where people get retarded. They're like, oh, it's a bear. It must be Russia. I'm like, no. Why do you need to say that? Like the details, they couldn't be more specific. Like the 3 ribs in the mouth of the bear. Persia conquered 3 nations essentially before, and that's what led to them. And each of these nations were strong and mighty. I believe it was Egypt, Babylon, and I want to say Syria, but I'm not sure. I always forget the third one. But it could not be more specific. It's obviously talking about Persia. Okay, and the third one, then if we're following this train of logic, it must be Greece. And again, Greece conquered with, if the wings signify speed, well, this one has 4 wings, and also the 4 heads of the leopard. We know that the Greek Empire was divided into 4 parts after the untimely death of Alexander the Great. Okay, and then finally the 4th beast. Now this, I believe, is Rome. Now other people believe, oh, it's the future one world government. Like, they'll actually be with me up until here. Then they'll say, oh, well, let's just... Again, it's like what people do with the church age thing. Like, no, there's no need to like take a massive leap in history like that. Nothing implies that. No, this is Rome, and this is obvious, I believe. So it has 10 horns, and the angel actually explains that the horns are angels. The horns are kings. And then you have this little horn that uproots 3 of them, and the horn blasphemes and persecutes the saints. Now people are like, oh, this is the Antichrist. I'm like, well, yes, it is the Antichrist. This is definitely an Antichrist figure. I believe that it's the Pope. Now, considering the influence of the Bishop of Rome, so the 10 kings of Rome, well, essentially there were the 10... Now, going back to the last prophecy, so you kind of have like the legs of iron, which are Rome. And again, this beast is also said to have great iron teeth, furthering the connection. And then it says it's like divided into 10 parts. You have the 10 toes of between 2 feet. And now these, let me see if I can remember off the top of my head. I have a massive poster in my room which has all this stuff in detail. Okay, it was the Huns, the Visigoths, the Franks, the Saxons, the Suevi, the Burgundians, and the Lombards. And these, all actually constitute modern European nations. But then you have 3 more. Those are 7, and you have 3 more which were wiped out of existence. The Ostrogoths, the Vandals, and the Heruli. And so the Bishop of Rome used his power. Now we know that these were Aryan tribes, and not like they were white. I mean, the Vandals were from North Africa, but Aryans with an I. And so they were persecuted for their heterodoxy, and they waged war against Rome. And I believe the Vandals are even referenced in Revelation. And I'll try to go a little faster because this could be a 2-hour podcast. But okay, so you have these. And then, then what did the Pope do with his power? Well, he persecuted Christians, and not just the Pope, but all of the bishops of Rome have historically persecuted Christians, what they call heretics, later Protestants. And to this day, even the Catholics agree that Pope Francis is the Antichrist. I mean, we're finally getting some interdenominational unity on this subject. But anyway. So that's Daniel 7. Daniel 8 is pretty similar. I'm actually not going to... Okay, so the big thing in Daniel 8 is the prophecy of 2,300 days, which is pretty complex. You know what? I will save it this time, maybe another podcast. Then you have Daniel 9, which I've discussed extensively. Daniel 10, 11, and 12 all kind of give this interesting and more literal prophecy regarding... Oh, and let me make this clear. When I said, the beasts represent nations, that's not my own conjecture. It's a symbol used in the Bible many times, and it explicitly says that the 4 beasts are 4 kingdoms. So anyway, and then Daniel 11 and 12 give this detailed thing about the king of the north, the king of the south, which was literally fulfilled in history to the point that they cope by saying it was actually written in the 2nd century BC instead of 6th century BC, because to admit that it was written in 6th century BC would be to admit that the Bible really is the Word of God. So that is definitely worth a study. Maybe I'll post a link in the notes to a preferred resource on that. Okay. And yeah, actually, I'll post all my favorite links on this subject. I don't agree with all of them 100% on every single little detail, but I'll post the ones that I agree with for the most part. Now, if we go to Revelation. So Revelation, again, I read this symbolically, but most people do to some degree. I think if you're going to read something symbolically, you have to be consistent with the meanings of the symbols. But anyway, so Revelation, you have the introduction in chapter 1, where John has this vision of Christ. Then we have 7 messages to 7 churches, and I think these are cool because they each have a literal meaning to the church at the time, a symbolic meaning referring to a period of church history, and this is evidenced by the letter to the church in Smyrna, where it says they shall have tribulation 10 days, and I believe this refers to the year, starting in the year 303, when the persecution under Diocletian began, until 313, when the Edict of Milan by Constantine was issued. And so, again, they had fierce persecution for 10 days or 10 years. So those are the first 2 meanings, and then there's also, I believe, a devotional meaning for each Christian to have ever lived, including all of us. So yeah, those are also really fun and valuable to study. And right now I believe we are in the age of the church in Laodicea, the last age, and this is the lukewarm age, and it's defined by our lukewarm. And I say this myself, I know I am lukewarm, at least to a degree. Well, yes and no, because I think one of the key aspects of being lukewarm is that you don't know you're lukewarm. But people will think, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I'm saved, blah blah, and then they go and they fornicate, or they smoke pot, and they still think that they are going to heaven. Well, hold on, we have to. You might want to abandon your wicked deeds first. But anyway, so okay, that's those are chapters 2 and 3. Then moving on to 4 and 5, you have this vision of the throne room of God. We have this book sealed with 7 seals. And again, I think so we know everyone's heard of the 7 seals. It's iconic, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, stuff like that. So I think these refer to, again, periods of church history. In fact, they kind of match up a bit with the 7 church ages. So you have the white horse, which represents the initial success of Christianity, the conqueror, and then you have the red horse, which symbolizes conflict, persecution. Then the third horse, or the third seal, is the horse of famine, which I believe represents the spiritual famine happening in this time. It was, I guess you could say, the beginning of, actually more towards the fall of the Roman Empire. I would actually put it maybe starting with, or sometime after the reign of Constantine. And then you have death and hell following with him. And he has power over the 4th part of the earth. I believe this is referring to the persecution of proto-Protestants and true Christians during the Dark Ages in Europe. Anyway, and so the 5th seal is the vindication of the martyrs, and I believe in some ways also referencing the Protestant Reformation. And then the 6th seal is the signs that occur before the end of the world. I would say we've even seen some of these signs already. And then the 7th seal, it actually doesn't have the 7th seal in Revelation chapter 6. Then it discusses the 144,000 faithful who will serve God. I do not believe these are literal Jews. I believe they are Christians. I don't believe that they're necessarily literal virgins either, but rather those who haven't been defiled with the whore church. But then we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, let me just go briefly through this so you can get the gist. Okay, now the 7th seal was silence in heaven for a half hour. I believe this is referring to heaven being empty as its denizens come to earth to receive us Christians into the kingdom for a half hour or 15 days. But moving on, then you have the 7 trumpets. Now the 7 trumpets are really cool, especially I would say the best way to prove that my hermeneutic of interpreting these prophecies is the fifth and sixth trumpets, which I believe so vividly, so clearly refer to the conquests and then the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And this is not just my opinion. This is, I think it was like a generally accepted Protestant opinion for a time. But nobody knows about this today. They think it's referring to attack helicopters or something schizophrenic like that. But yeah, Revelation 8 and 9. Look, I'll just put the link in the notes and you can read those. And it's really amazing. It's super cool how specific and precise the prophecy was, and actually is documented how it was fulfilled. For the sake of time, I'm going to go to Revelation 12:13. Revelation 12 is not referring to Mary. It's not, because, well, one, they say Mary had no birth pains. This woman in Revelation 12 has birth pains. No, it's referring to the church, and that's the crown of 12 stars. Stars represent leaders. It's referring to the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles, etc. No, this is not Mary. This is the church. The church fled into the wilderness. Mary did not flee into the wilderness. Mary did not have wings like a great eagle. No, it's. So okay, yeah. Actually, let's talk about this, because the church, even in the Old Testament, the church Israel is always referred to as an adulterous woman, whereas the church should be a pure virgin, a chaste virgin, as Paul says. That's how he wants to present the church to Christ. And yeah, this analogy, this symbol of a woman to represent the church, it's used here in Revelation and also in Revelation 17, as we'll see in a moment. The church, the true church, is a pure and faithful woman clothed in white, who has kept herself pure for her husband, Jesus Christ. And I believe this is what Revelation 12 is referring to. Now, if we go to Revelation 13, the beast. Okay, yes, so then we have the beast. And I do believe this refers to the Vatican, or the Holy Roman Empire, but essentially the Vatican. And this beast, it received a deadly wound in 1798. And I didn't even discuss any of the time prophecies, how from 538 to 1798 you have 1,260 days, or 3.5 years, but prophetic years. You have this whole well-documented time period of how Rome prospered and persecuted and oppressed true Christians in this time. But then it was Napoleon, he came and he sacked the Vatican and exiled the Pope, and causing the loss of the Pope's temporal power until it was healed by the Lateran Treaty. And then we have the mark of the beast. Now, okay, let me talk about what I consider the mark of the beast to be, because I do think it's important. So, you guys know I am a Seventh-day Adventist, which means that from Friday sundown, a couple hours from now, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, I observe the day as a day of rest, worship, and ministry. This is not a popular belief. I don't know many people who also hold this belief, even though I think it's pretty clear from the scriptures. But you try talking to people about it, and they're like, most people don't agree with you, so you must be wrong. Anyway, but what I believe, the mark of the beast, I believe Sunday, keeping the Sunday holy. I just say keeping the Sunday holy. Excuse me. It's been a long podcast. Keeping Sunday holy is not something that was commanded by the Bible. I believe it was commanded by Rome. Or really commanded by the devil. And I don't think it's something that Christians should do. And I believe in the end, when the one world government comes together, and I'm not sure exactly the guys that will do this under. I'm sympathetic to the Climate Sunday giga theory that they're gonna basically say, well, you can't cause any carbon emissions on Sunday. If you do, we're gonna kill you. Something like that. Who knows? But I believe the mark of the beast, objectively, the mark of the beast must refer to a violation of God's law. It is not something arbitrary like, oh, they put like a barcode on you. They give you a vaccine. No, it must be something that goes, like if somebody said, or if it turned out, for example, that the mark of the beast was state-mandated homosexuality. Okay, that could be a totally plausible alternate interpretation, but I believe it's the Sabbath because I believe the Sabbath is the sign of God's covenant people, and so Satan creates a counterfeit mark, counterfeit sign for his people. But yeah, if you have more questions about that, you can leave a comment, but I do believe that is coming, possibly very soon. Who knows? Okay, then moving on, Revelation 14, you have the 144,000. Again, you have the warnings of the three angels, and I believe the church, we will have a great work to do in warning people of the mark of the beast, among other things. And then finally, now I do not believe, I think from here on out, actually something in Revelation 10, that there should be time no longer. I think in a way it also refers to how much of what follows is in the future. So these final 7 plagues, which will kill everyone on earth who's not a Christian, who's not a true Christian, they're poured out, and then Jesus returns, and that's Revelation 15 and 16. Now let's talk about Revelation 17 for a second. Babylon the Great, the whore of Babylon. Who is she? Again, as you may have gathered, I consider the Catholic Church to be a whore church, the great whore church. All their whore churches are her daughters, and I believe she has been entirely unfaithful to God. She has disobeyed his commands. She has fornicated with the kings of the earth. You can see how Rome is how she has wielded her dread influence over the centuries. And yeah, I believe she'll be destroyed. And that's Revelation 17 and 18. Again, you have questions. Like, I can go into... I don't just believe this because I hate Pope Francis. No, I have legitimate typological reasons to consider this. So, Revelation 19 is the wedding feast of the Lamb. And then, again, Revelation 20 is what we were discussing earlier about the millennium. And then, so after the millennium, then we have the final judgment. So I believe the wicked are all destroyed at the end of the or at the beginning of the first millennium, and you have 1,000 years where the wicked are all dead. And during this time, the saints render judgment, and then finally, Satan and all the other wicked, his angels, all the wicked people on this earth, they are raised from the dead, so that they can receive their judgment, their sentence, their judgment, and then be destroyed in hell. And then finally, we have the creation of a new heaven and a new earth, and we see a wonderful vision of New Jerusalem. And yeah, that's basically, to sum up my beliefs, that's how I read the book of Revelation. Hopefully, I'm going to stop this here because this podcast is almost an hour. But that is what I believe. I've discussed what some other people believe. I think what I believe is, I find it to be the most convincing interpretation I've read of the Bible, or of Revelation, that I've seen and that I've studied. I'm just not impressed by other views. I don't know how I have not seen a more reasonable view yet. And we could discuss Matthew 24 too, and Thessalonians, and even Ezekiel. There's prophecies there too, but we'll leave it at that. For now. Maybe I'll make a part 2 someday. But yeah, that's what I believe. Do I think the world is ending soon? Probably. I would be quite surprised if I made it to old age, or if this world made it even to the... Yeah, I expect to see the coming of Christ in my lifetime. If not in the next few years, very soon. And we could do a whole nother podcast of how that influences my life and how it should influence our lives, but we'll end it there. Hopefully this casts some light on this topic. Thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next time.